I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast. The Revelation 13 podcast presents breaking news.
Hello and welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast. In early December of 2009, a strange blue light was seen rising from behind a mountain in the north of Norway. It seemed to stop in midair and began moving in circles, creating a giant glowing spiral in the sky. Also, a green-blue beam of light was shining out of the center of the spiral. This phenomenon lasted for 10 to 12 minutes before disappearing. The Norwegian Meteorological Institute was immediately flooded with calls reporting the incident, and images of the spiral made it onto television and the internet. Initial reports by onlookers said it looked like a giant fireball or shooting star moving in circles. The Norwegian Defense Ministry suggested that it was probably a new Russian missile that was being tested and failed. But initially the Russians denied conducting any missile tests in the area until the story appeared in Russian newspapers days later. The test fired the new Balava missile from the Russian submarine Dmitry Danskia in the White Sea early on Wednesday morning, creating the light show when it failed in its third stage, creating the spiral effect from reflections on leaking fuel. The Balava missile had so far been a failure to the Russian military, and they have 9 failed launches fired from 13 tests. They had high hopes for this new missile, which would have a range of 5,000 miles and the capacity of delivering 10 nuclear warheads to separate targets. Since the end of the Cold War, the U.S. has had a better relationship with the Russians, and it makes you wonder why they would try to develop new nuclear delivery systems and not improve conventional weapons. Now, who do they need to protect themselves from with nuclear weapons? China, maybe. They've had shaky relations in the past, but recently they have been in agreement. Iran in the Middle East, this would seem a logical choice, except the Russians have been helping Iran and other Middle Eastern states develop nuclear technology and selling them weapons. And Europe and the Europeans as a whole want nothing to do with getting into another major war with anybody. The U.S. is still looked upon. The U.S. is still looked upon as the enemy in certain quarters in Russia, and this was evidenced by former Prime Minister of the Russian Republic, Vladimir Putin, when he made these remarks, stating Russia needs more weapons to punch through America's new missile defense shield, and Moscow should press ahead with a new generation of weapons to stop the Americans from doing whatever they want. To preserve the balance, we must develop offensive weapons systems, not missile defense systems, as the U.S. is doing. Putin also called for the U.S. to share its missile defense technology with Russia. Putin, although no longer president of Russia, is still ruling behind the scenes. He has a hand-picked successor to hold his seat until he could legally run for office again in 2012. Putin at one time ran the KGB and seems to have an interest in returning Russia to its former prominence that it had during the Cold War. Late last year, an arrest warrant was issued for Tzipi Livni, former Prime Minister of Israel and head of the Kadima Party, by a British court for war crimes against Palestinians during Operation Cast Lead, a 3-week operation launched by the Israeli government to root out those who had been launching rocket attacks from Gaza. Miss Livni was on the war cabinet at the time and had a role in making operational decisions. Palestinians claim 1,400 people were killed, mostly civilians, whereas Israelis claim 1,166 died, mostly combatants. Miss Livni was scheduled to speak at a Jewish National Fund conference, but she canceled in advance due to time constraints. Lawyers acting for Palestinian victims requested that the Westminster Magistrate Court issue the warrant. The court issued the warrant, but later dropped it when it became clear that Miss Livni was not in England. This marks the first time that an Israeli prime minister or politician has faced arrest for war crimes by the British court system. The 1988 Criminal Justice Act gives England and Wales universal jurisdiction in war crime cases. This apparently is the next tactic the world is going to use against Israel to try to bully them into whatever peace agreement they may want them to agree to. Prime ministers may now think twice about military exercises against the Palestinians if they are to face war crime courts at a future date, especially now when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is deciding what action to take against Iran's nuclear facilities. He's promised on the campaign trail not to allow Iran to get nukes, and they are trying they're trying to get the world community to impose sanctions and help them resolve the situation peacefully, but so far nothing substantial has happened. Eventually, there'll be a point of no return, and when Iran's reactor is active, and any bombs destroying it would cause radioactive debris to fall on the Gulf states. A recent poll conducted in 18 Arab countries found that a majority of the people believe that Iran is a bigger threat than Israel, and that 33% believe that Iran is just as likely to target them as Israel. Part of this mistrust comes from the fact that the Arabs and Iranians don't get along. Iranians or Persians are not Arabs, like most of the Middle East. Also, when Islam conquered Iran and converted it, the Iranians eventually became Shia Muslim, while the larger majority of Muslims are Sunni. The difference between the two groups stems from which relative of Muhammad was a legitimate heir to Islam after Muhammad died with no male children. So it's not surprising when news reports say that Israel and other Arab neighbors have been talking strategy in dealing with Iran if a war breaks out. The Saudi Arabian government may have given Israel permission to fly over its airspace to attack Iran's facilities. Also, neighboring countries may have discussed how to deal with the threat of Hezbollah and Hamas, who Iran controls and may use to strike back at Israel and others if the attack occurs. National Irish Bank, one of Ireland's main consumer banks, is no longer accepting cash in any of its branches. Customers were advised to get cash from ATMs or to get cash back from their debit cards. This program is going to be phased into all the branches over the next 18 months. Europe has been moving towards a cashless society at a much quicker pace than the US. Their goal is to make financial transactions easier and safer and more cost effective. And these things are not bad.